Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Gotham City never slept beneath the steel canopy of skyscrapers and the looming shadow of the Wayne Tower. The city's Silverike house was slow but constant. Batman's world was one of dark alleyways and hidden threats, and tonight the darkness seemed thicker than usual. Bruce Wayne, in his cowl, moved silently through an abandoned construction site, his cape swaying in the midnight breeze. Reports had come in about a strange artifact uncovered by workers just days earlier, and as always, curiosity demanded his attention. Standing before the cold metal box, his fingers brushed over its surface. It hummed with an unfamiliar energy, alien perhaps. The Batcave systems had picked up unusual radiation levels near the site, and now here he was, staring into the heart of what could be a new threat. Suddenly, the box shifted. A crack appeared, and a strange substance, black and viscous, seeped through the crevice. Before Bruce could react, the substance lunged at him, wrapping around his arm like a living entity. His instincts kicked in, but before he could pull away, it slithered up his neck and into his mouth, filling his mind with sudden pressure. His world went black. 3 days later, Barry Allen, the Flash, zipped through the Batcave. Alfred had called him after noticing Bruce's disturbing behavior. It wasn't like Batman to cut himself off from the world, not this way, not even from his most trusted ally. Barry wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew Bruce, and if something was wrong, they needed to intervene before it was too late. "Alfred, anything new?" Barry asked, his voice a blur as he stopped at the Batcomputer. Alfred stood nearby, hands clasped, worries etched into his face. "He's been erratic, sir, violent even. He hasn't left the Batcave in 2 days. And when I approached him, the butler's voice faltered. He wasn't himself." Barry's jaw tightened. Bruce had always been the most controlled, the most methodical of them all. If he was spiraling, something was terribly wrong. "We'll talk to him." The speedster dashed up the stairs and into Wayne Manor. The grand halls, usually quiet, were even more so now. It was as if the entire house held its breath. He found Bruce standing by a window, his back to the room, arms crossed. But something about his stance was off, too rigid, too still. "Bruce," Barry called, his voice soft but firm. "It's me. What's going on?" For a moment, there was no response. Then, slowly, Bruce turned around, and Barry's breath caught in his throat. His eyes, they weren't tea, right? Instead of the sharp, calculating gaze of the dark night, there was a dull black sheen. And the way he moved, sluggish and deliberate, it was as if he was fighting something within himself. "Leave, Barry," Bruce said, his voice deeper than usual. A hint of a snarl, lacing the word. Barry stepped forward, his fists clenched. "I'm not leaving until I figure out what it is." Bruce's lips curled into a grimace, and without warning, he lunged. Barry barely had time to react, dodging Bruce's fist by mere inches. Bruce, what the hell are you doing?" But Bruce didn't answer. His movements were wild, animalistic, a far cry from the trained precision of Batman. It was as if something else was in control, using Bruce's body as a puppet. Barry knew he couldn't keep dodging forever. "I don't want to hurt you." He yelled, hoping to reach whatever part of Bruce was still in there. But his words fell on deaf ears. Bruce came at him again, this time faster, more vicious. The Flash moved at super speed, running circles around him, hoping to tire him out, but it didn't work. If anything, it made Bruce angrier. Then, out of nowhere, Barry saw a brief flicker of hesitation in Bruce. In that split second, his old friend was there, fighting against whatever had taken hold of him. But just as quickly it was gone, replaced by the dark sheen once more. Barry took a deep breath. This was worse than he thought. Whatever had control of Bruce, wasn't just some random mind control. It was something deeper, something alien, and it wasn't letting go without a fight. Back in the Batcave, Barry, now exhausted, sat by the Batcomputer, running every diagnostic and analysis he could. Cyborg had been looped in, his digital form appearing on the screen. "This is some next-level tech," Cyborg said, his voice crackling through the feed. "It's not just mind control. This thing is parasitic." "Parasitic," Barry repeated, his heart sinking. "It's feeding off Bruce's emotions, his darkest ones, guilt, anger, fear. Everything that makes Bruce Batman is fueling this thing, and the more it feeds, the stronger it gets." Barry ran a hand through his hair. "So how do we stop it?" "I don't know yet," Cyborg admitted. But we have to find a way to weaken its hold. Barry's mind raced. He had faced aliens, speedsters, and godlike beings, but this was different. This wasn't just a battle of fists or speed. This was psychological, emotional, and Bruce was losing. Suddenly, an idea hit him. What if I could reach him, get inside his mind? Cyborg raised an eyebrow. That's risky. If the parasite senses you, it could latch onto you too. Barry's resolve hardened. I have to try. I can't let Bruce go through this alone. It wasn't very easy. With Cyborg's help, Barry used his speed to vibrate at a frequency that allowed him to enter Bruce's subconscious. The moment he stepped into Bruce's mind, he felt it darkness. It was thick, oppressive, like wading through tar. The landscape around him was a twisted version of Gotham, the streets lined with shadowy figures whispering accusations and fear. Bruce, Barry called, his voice echoing in the void. From the shadows, Batman emerged, but it wasn't the Bruce he knew. This version was gaunt, his face hollow, his eyes dark and lifeless. The parasite had taken deep root, feeding off his deepest fear. Barry could feel it, years of guilt over his parents' deaths, the weight of Gotham, as safety, the constant battle against crime. It was all too much. Bruce, Barry said softly, stepping toward him. Batman snapped toward him, his voice low and venomous. Christ, you don't understand. You never have. Barry winced, but stood his ground. Shall maybe not, but I know what it's like to feel alone. To think no one can understand what you were going through. But that's not true, Bruce. You have people who care about you. Alfred, the League, me. For a moment, Batman hesitated. The shadows around them shifted, growing weaker. Barry could feel the parasite's grip loosening, but it wasn't gone. Yet, you have to fight it, Bruce, he urged. We were stronger than this. Bruce's face twisted in pain, his hands clutching his head. Caught its eye too strong, teeth, he whispered. I can't. Barry stepped closer, placing a hand on his friend's shoulder. Yes, you can. You've been through worse. You've fought gods, aliens. This thing doesn't stand a chance against you. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the darkness began to recede. Bruce's eyes cleared, and the weight lifted from his shoulder. The parasite weakened, hissed in anger, but it was no match for Batman's willpower. Together, they expelled it from Bruce's mind, the alien entity dissipating into the void with a final, pitiful wail. Back in the real world, Bruce gasped as he regained control of his body. The parasite, now nothing more than a faint shadow, slithered out of him only to be destroyed by cyborg technology. Barry knelt beside him, exhausted but relieved. Are you okay? Bruce nodded, though his face was pale, his body weak. Thanks, crying. He muttered, his voice hoarse. Barry smiled. As Bruce stood, shaky but determined, Barry couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Bruce had faced his darkest demons and come out stronger, and though their relationship had always been complicated, Barry knew they were more than just teammates. They were friends. The darkness of Gotham was still there, but for the first time in a long while, Barry felt like they had a real shot at beating it together. Bruce stood in the Batcave, his hand pressed against the console, his reflection distorted in the dim screen light. He was quiet, as he often was, but this time there was a new tension, a ripple of unease that Barry hadn't seen before. Flash stood next to him, still catching his breath from their shared ordeal. Even for a speedster, the mental and emotional battle had been draining, but Bruce had taken the brunt of it. He had fought not just the parasite, but the part of himself that always struggled with isolation and guilt. For a while, neither of them spoke. The familiar hum of the Batcave set computers filled the air, and Alfred busied himself silently in the background, tending to the residual damage from the parasite. The alien entity may have been purged, but it had left scars physically and mentally. Finally, Barry broke the silence. You don't have to do this alone. You know, whatever that thing was, it didn't just feed on you. It fed on your belief that you had to carry all of this by yourself. Bruce's jaw tightened. I am not used to relying on others. You know that. Barry smiled, though it was tinged with exhaustion. Yeah, I know. But this time, it almost cost you everything. We don't always get second chances like this. Bruce turned toward him, his dark eyes locking onto Barry. I wasn't in control, it had me. I didn't see a way out. His voice trailed off. And for the first time, and as long as Barry had known him, Bruce Wayne seemed vulnerable. Not in the way that came with physical weakness, but in the sense that he had been exposed, his tightly guarded emotions pried open by a force that even he couldn't outthink or outfight. Barry nodded, slowly. "It's okay, Bruce. We don't always have to be in control. That's why we have each other." Bruce turned back to the console, his fingers moving over the keyboard with mechanical precision as if refocusing on his work could erase the memory of what had just transpired. But there was something different in the way he carried himself. Maybe Barry thought this was a start toward Bruce realizing that even Batman needed help sometimes. Before he could speak again, the screen lit up, pulling Bruce's attention back to it. As more, Bruce said quietly, "The parasite, it wasn't trapping alone." Barry blinked, stepping closer. "What do you mean?" Bruce's fingers danced across the keys, bringing up a series of encrypted messages intercepted from a source that Barry didn't recognize. "This isn't just an isolated incident. The parasite was sent here targeted." Barry frowned. "By who?" Bruce's face hardened. "That's what I am trying to find out." As the data streamed across the screen, Barry's stomach churned. The thought of someone or something sending that entity to target Bruce directly was disturbing enough, but the idea that it could be part of a larger plan was even worse. Gotham had always been a battleground for the strange and sinister, but this was on another level. Bruce was already analyzing the data, his mind back in full detective mode. Whoever sent it knew exactly what they were doing. The entity was designed to target my weaknesses, my darkest emotion. Barry's mind raced. He couldn't imagine anyone better equipped to strike at Bruce's emotional core than someone who knew him intimately. But why you? Why now? Bruce shook his head. "I don't know. I'll find out." For the next few hours, they worked in tandem, dissecting every fragment of data that Bruce's systems had pulled from the parasite before it was destroyed. Flash helped as much as he could, his fingers tapping rapidly across the Batcave's auxiliary consoles, matching Bruce at pace. But the deeper they dug, the more complex the situation became. Finally, Bruce straightened, his expression grim. "The signals lead back to a source off-planet, somewhere far beyond Earth." Barry's eyes widened. "So we were dealing with an extraterrestrial threat." Bruce nodded. "But this isn't just some random attack. Whoever sent this knows me, knows us. They know how to strike at our vulnerability." Barry skipped a beat. The League had faced alien threats before, but this felt personal, so what do we do now? Bruce turned toward him, his eyes colder than before. "We prepare. If this is part of a larger plot, we need to be ready, not just me, all of us." Barry nodded, though a sense of dread was beginning to settle in his chest. Whoever was behind this, they weren't just targeting Batman. They were targeting the Justice League itself, and worse, they had found a way to exploit their greatest strength, the trust they had in one another. For the next several days, Bruce isolated himself in the Batcave. Barry visited as often as he could, sometimes just to check in, other times to lend a hand with the ongoing investigation. They traced every signal, every piece of alien technology that Bruce had cataloged over the years, trying to find some connection, some link that would explain who had sent the parasite and why. One night, just as Barry was about to leave, Bruce spoke without turning around. "You did well, Barry, back there. In my mind, I couldn't have done it alone." Barry paused, surprised by the admission. "You re-welcome, but it wasn't me, just me." "You fought too, Bruce. You fought harder than anyone else could have." Bruce was silent for a moment, his hands resting on the console in front of him. "We were all vulnerable to something," he said quietly, "even me." Barry stepped closer, placing a hand on his friend's shoulder. "That's what makes us human. Bruce, even you." The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that comes with understanding an unspoken bond between two people who had been through hell and come out the other side. Eventually, Barry left, speeding out of the Batcave and into the night. Gotham's skyline blurred past him as he ran, his mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. This wasn't over. Whoever had targeted Bruce wasn't going to stop. And now, more than ever, Barry knew that they would need each other to face whatever was coming. Back in the Batcave, Bruce stared at the data on the screen, his mind already working through the next step. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time in a long while, he wasn't facing it alone. The night outside was darker than usual, but the lights inside the Batcave glowed faintly, a symbol of the battle that was always being fought, even when the city above was silent. Bruce's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He knew the darkness better than anyone. He had lived in it, thrived in it. But tonight, something had changed. The darkness didn't seem quite as suffocating. It wasn't quite as alone. And as Bruce sat in the quiet of the Batcave, he realized something else. Maybe he didn't have to carry the weight of it all by himself anymore.